was expecting and has previously come from the town, which is now not even on the budget. How do I get visibility into those
Mr. Forensic.
those services, those situations?
That's an interesting question because it happens all the time. If you look, for example, Council on Aging, we tried to quantify that in terms of how many volunteer services we get from people that do the scheduling, to do the trip planning, and all of those sorts of things. And it's a lot of money, it's a lot of hours, it's a lot of volunteer hours that we get. As many of you know, for some of the taxpayers, there's an opportunity to work for the town and not have to pay. They work at a, for the town. They provide services to the town. They get a reduction in taxes. How do you account for that? We have, in the case of the trees, we had a resident step forward. In the case of Delta Maintenance, for example, now that's been maintained by the Public Works Department. We've had many organizations step forward and say, okay, we will take responsibility for maintaining that particular Delta or that particular item. So there's a lot of those things that are going on all the time, and it's a very difficult thing to quantify, but it's happening all the time. And as we take a step back, all right, in terms of how we spend the money, and find other ways of doing it, then you're right. I mean, but I wouldn't have the foggiest idea how we could actually quantify that in a way that would be meaningful.
Mr. Younger.
Thank you. I actually feel like I'm at Barnes & Noble signing autographs for a book. But the town report does have, in the Special Revenue Fund section of the financial statements, a listing of that. So if you can pick up your town report, you can see a listing of what special funds have for those areas.
So that would include something like the tree planting donation and the any textbook grant and so forth?
I can't speak for the textbook grant. The tree donation is a first-timer, so it wouldn't be showing in here, but other types of funds would be.
Would it be in the future? Or?
It could be in the future, yes, depending upon the funds and how much we get in, yes.
Thank you.
Ms. Cokum.
Chris Cokum, Precinct 8, Town Meeting Member. I think that many people in this room know that there are many organizations in the town that assist the town in operating. The Brennan Grant Foundation, Foundation for Belmont Education, soccer associations pay for field maintenance. It probably would be a good idea for us as a community to document the people that step up and quietly do the work that help the town run and help us to not need as many overrides, if you will. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Olson.
Thomasina Olson, Precinct 5. To kind of back up what Chris just said, I think it's hard to quantify everything that is done in the town, and I guess I'm a little mystified by a different approach than one that I would take. I'm grateful when people provide services. I'm grateful to the donor, the $13,000 donor for the trees. I think that it shows a sense of appreciation for the community. I'm a little surprised that people seem to think that that's a bad thing, that we should keep that $13,000 in the budget. I mean, we decided to put $13,000 into something else. I'm assuming that the warrant committee spent many hours looking at what was available and what they could actually fund, and I am just absolutely grateful for all the donations in this town, and I'm really surprised that people look at it differently.
I think we're ready for a vote on the OPEB liability. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed? It's approved by more than the two-thirds required. We now turn to Article 3, Floyd Carmen. Thank you, Mr. Curtis.
Welcome.
Floyd Carmen, Town Treasurer. Article 3, moved that the sum of $4,561,561.40 be transferred as follows in order to meet said expenses of the town of Belmont, which are appropriated under Article 4, 5, 6, 7, and 10 of the annual town meeting on April 28, 2008. $1,048,000 from the fund balance and abatement and exemption surplus account to program 080 Assessor Services into program 099 Insurance. $2,320,000 from unreserved fund balances, formerly referred to as free cash, to program 099 Retirement and Insurance. $150,000 from unreserved fund balances, formerly referred to as free cash, to Town Stabilization Fund to fund OPEB liability, other post-employment benefits, non-retirement. $282,750 from Belmont Municipal Light Department to Debt Service Program 700 and 710, maturing debt and interest on debt. $45,000 from fund balances and parking meters to program 135, Police Traffic Management. $20,000 from cemetery perpetual care income for program 350, cemetery maintenance. $37,666.12 from various leftover capital expenditures and planning to help offset the costs for a comprehensive zoning plan. $8,145.28 premium on sale of bonds to offset property tax debt exclusion. $650,000 from Belmont Municipal Light Department to offset the tax rate. In addition, the entire revenue derived from the sale of electricity to private customers and municipal departments from the cost of street lighting and from jobbing during the 12 months beginning January 1st, 2008, be allocated and appropriated for the operating expenses of the Municipal Light Department, including all out-of-state travel, all said appropriations and payments to be expended under the direction of the Municipal Light Board, and that the town accountant is hereby authorized to make such transfers on the books of the town.
You made it. Thank you. Is there any discussion? Mr. Simmons?
Mr. Moderator, Joel Samuels, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 6. Could you please define other post-employment benefits, non-retirement? Is this retiree health care?
Yes, that's what it is, retiree health care.
Could you state the current balance for unfunded liability for, in other words, we're providing $150,000 for retiree health care. What is the unfunded liability for retiree health care in Belmont right now?
I believe it's around $144 million.
Thank you.
Close, huh? Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, $121 million. With our latest.
Is there any other discussion? All those, this requires two-thirds vote. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed? It's approved unanimously. We have 4 more articles. I'm prepared to go a little past 11. We'll have to make a decision. So we'll see where about whether we have to resume on Monday or not. Article 22, Jennifer Fallon.
Mr. Moderator, Jennifer Fallon, Chairman of the Planning Board and Town Meeting Member from Precinct 1, moved that under Article 22, the reading of the proposed amendment to Section 4.3.5 accessory buildings of the zoning bylaw of the town be dispensed with, the same being set forth in full under Article 22 in the warrant for this meeting and having been distributed to each town meeting member.
All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion is unanimously approved.
Moved that the town vote to amend the zoning bylaw of the town in Section 4.3.5 of the zoning bylaws accessory buildings as set forth in full under Article 22 in the warrant for this town meeting.
Is there a report of the Planning Board?
The Planning Board unanimously recommends favorable action.
Ms. Fallon, do you want to?
This is a very simple amendment. It's just a clarifying amendment. It brings two sections of the bylaw into agreement. This will not change the way the bylaw has been implemented by the Zoning Board of Appeals at all. It clarifies that an accessory structure, being a tool shed or a garage or something similar, must be set back a minimum of 5 feet from both the lot lines and the principal structure. The existing language, as I said, is not consistent, and if you move to the next slide, we can see why not. The existing language, which shows in red up there, shows that it currently reads may be built to within 5 feet of the sideline and rear line of the lot, as well as to within 5 feet of the principal building. And we wish to change that to shall be set back at least 5 feet from the sideline and the rear line and 5 feet from the principal building. That is the way, as I said, the bylaw is used now. It just simply clarifies the language because there has been some confusion from people bringing things to the zoning board about whether within means closer than or at least 5 feet from. So this clarifies the language, and it's very straightforward.
Is there a discussion? Mr. Mercier.
Donna Mercier, Precinct 8. This sounds like it precludes anybody from attaching their shed to their existing building as long as it's within 5 feet of the side and rear yard?
No, it just refers to buildings that are separate. If it's attached, it's part of the structure.
Well, if somebody wants to add to their garage, or they want to add a garage to their house, this sounds like they can't do that.
I'm sorry. This is, okay, so this is only for accessory structures. If something is attached to the principal structure, it's part of the principal structure. So if someone wants a garage that is within the setback limits for a principal structure, they could do that.
But somebody can't put a lean-to their existing garage for a storage shed.
It has to be set back at least 5 feet from the lot line and from the principal structure.
That I understand, but why would that lean-to have to be set back from the structure? I don't understand what the rationale is behind that.
I assume it has to do with the ability to get equipment and things through the opening. I mean, if something is too close to a building, it causes problems for fire, for example. If it's part of a building, it's a different category.
So does this say that you can attach it to, but you can't have a space between the two less than 5 feet?
That's correct.
So, okay.
Gentleman on the left.
Hi, Bob Copeland, Precinct 8, Town Meeting Member. Just in terms of clarification, I could almost interpret that as saying it must be exactly 5 feet from the principal building.
It says at least. It says at least 5 feet.
Shouldn't it say, and at least 5 feet from the principal building?
Oh. Well, perhaps. The at least is supposed to refer to both. I hope that it does.
Well, where the purpose is clarification.
I understand.
Yeah,
That's, thank you.
Is there other discussion? We take a vote then. This requires a 2/3 vote. Oh, sorry, did I miss? Ms. Page.
Jennifer Page, Precinct 3. Jenny, I think that that's a good point that was just raised. And would it not be possible, Mr. Moderator, to have a, oh God, if I ask you the question, then I can't make the motion at the end.
Well, go ahead and make the motion then.
All right.
If that's where you're headed.
I move that between the words and 5 on the next to the last line, we insert the words at least.
Fine. I'll accept the, second. Okay, I'll accept the amendment. Does the planning board have a reaction to that?
Okay.
I think it's just
Can I actually make a point here, and perhaps the amendment will be changed just slightly? Mr. Skloot pointed out to me that because section, if you look under the existing language, section 4.3.5 B2 has the same problem, and in order to make them agree, the amendment would have to be proposed for both section. It's up to the moderator. Yeah, I mean, it's, if such an amendment is acceptable, it has to be made in two places.
And where else does it have to be made?
Under B2.
If you look on the slide, the second bullet and the third bullet would have to, the red bullets would have to be changed.
Right. My motion only pertained to the third bullet, and so the second bullet would also have to, I would like to change my motion, Mr.
Well, excuse me,
Moderator.
the town council reminds me that it's outside the scope to change the existing language, so we can't make the change in both. So we'll either have to just make it in one or yes, please speak to that, Mr. Giorgio.
Mr. Moderator, through you to the town meeting members, I understand the concern that the previous speaker has raised, but the way I would interpret the bylaw is consistent with the way the current bylaw is written in section B2, and I would interpret it that at least language refers to the 5 feet in both portions of that sentence. And I think that is a completely reasonable interpretation of the bylaw in light of the purposes behind the bylaw. So I don't think that an amendment is necessary to the language that's been proposed by the planning board.
Ms. Page, in view of that and in view of the
Well-
fact that we can't change the other one, are you open to withdrawing the amendment?
I'm open to withdrawing it, but I would have thought if we're trying to clarify the amendment, we want to get it right. You know?
If I might, Mr. Moderator, if it only appeared in that one section, I would say add the at least and there'd be no harm. However, we can't add at least to the other section of the bylaw because that would be outside the scope. So if you made your amendment, I'm afraid that it would create an internal inconsistency in the bylaw that would have perhaps the unintended consequence of requiring
Of
exactly
differentiating
5
between-
feet in
making
section
it seem as
B2.
though
So I
there
think
were
it's
an
better
intended difference.
not to make the amendment. I think the interpretation of the language as proposed by the planning board, at least in my mind, is clear what the intent is, that it's at least 5 feet in both parts of that sentence.
Ms. Page, is that acceptable to you?
Well, of course, I bow to the judgment of town council, but I would have to say that I hope maybe sometime we can have another clarifying amendment that would take care of both.
Is there any other discussion on this? Requires a 2/3 vote. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? It passes by more than, approved by more than 2/3. Article 23, Sammy Baghdadi. Where are you, Sammy?
I think you're going 24 next.
24.
I mean 24, sorry. And Mr. Rojas, right?
Andy Rojas, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 5, member of the Planning Board. Moved that Article 24, the reading of the proposed amendments to Section 1.4, definitions and abbreviations, and Section 5.2.3, general requirements of the zoning bylaw of the town be dispensed with, the same being set forth in full under Article 24 in the warrant for this meeting and having been distributed to each town meeting member.
All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? The motion is passed, approved unanimously. Mr. Rojas.
Moved that the town vote to amend the zoning bylaw of the town in Section 1.4, definitions and abbreviations, and Section 5.2.3, general requirements, as set forth in full under Article 24 in the warrant for this meeting.
Does the planning board have a position on this?
The planning board unanimously recommends approval of this amendment.
And Mr. Rojas, do you want to describe this?
Yes. The reason this amendment is proposed is that there already exist regulations for what percentage of a window area can be covered by signage. That is not being affected. What is really affected is that the definition of a sign has been the issue. A sign right now in the bylaw basically says that it needs to be affixed to the window. And what's happened is that in many instances, the enforcement people have come up to us and said, people are hanging signs within 2-3 feet of the window, effectively acting as a window sign, and yet there's no regulation that allows us to enforce this violation of the window area coverage. Storefront windows, they serve both a public and a private purpose, and they provide for attractive, people-friendly streetscapes. That's the reason that these percentages exist. Because of that, we're proposing that there be a definitional change. Let's go to the next one, the facts. We're not affecting the percentage. The percentage right now, the 20% of the window coverage by signage, that stays put. The only thing that we're affecting is this 3-foot zone. So basically, if somebody hangs a banner that's really a sign within the 3-foot zone, that counts as a sign. It doesn't need to be affixed to the window. It could be freestanding, it could be hung from the ceiling, or it could be attached in some other manner. But if it's within that 3-foot zone, it's really acting like a sign. We're making a definitional change between a window sign and a window display, and this is the key. A window display is any arrangement or presentation of merchandise placed within 3 feet of a window, but not including any pricing, dollar amount, or signage intended to augment the display of the merchandise. Signs associated with a window display are considered a window sign for the purposes of this bylaw. Basically, that's a window display. They're displaying items. You don't really see pricing. You don't see for sale or big sale today or signs like that. You see the product in a very attractive manner acting as a display as opposed to a sign. Next slide, please. Window sign. A window sign it will now be defined as a sign posted, painted, placed, or affixed in or on a window exposed to public view and is visible from the exterior of the building, or a sign that is located within 3 feet of the glass of a window exposed to public view and visible from the exterior of the building. This example shows the problem. There are signs that are affixed to the window, that are affixed to the storefront, and that are propped behind the glass, and that really are trying to skirt the definition of window sign. We're trying to now define it more clearly so that enforcement has the legs to stand on to be able to make the percentages really happen. I think that, not only for attractiveness and people-friendliness of our, public spaces, but there's also issues of visual penetration into the store. There's, potential issues of safety and so on that do come up. The existing bylaw basically describes the permanent signs painted or placed inside the glass of the window. In the proposed bylaw, we're saying that the signs or associated with a window display are permitted as long as they do not exceed the 50%. It basically brings into play the definition of the 3-foot zone and makes the distinction between a window sign and a window display.
Is there discussion? Ms. Page.
Yes, Jennifer Page, Precinct 3. About 5 years ago, the Vision Implementation Committee did a good deal of work reaching out to the business community to find out what some of their concerns were. And it was a very interesting experience, and I think that the business community, by and large, felt ignored by the town and not appreciated. And even though this is presented as sort of just a way of making clearer an existing bylaw, clarifying it in a way, I'm wondering whether you had reactions from the business community, if they were involved in any way, if they came to the hearing, what they had to say about it, whether there has been any kind of outreach to them about this.
Mr. Rojas.
We did receive input at the public hearing from the business community, and as you might imagine, landlords and some business people would prefer no restriction on their window signs, which is why this whole creative way of putting up signs within 3 feet without touching the glass came up. But it is a loophole that, does affect enforcement and does affect whether Belmont wants more than 20% of the window area covered up, which is, in fact, we're not touching that requirement. So in order to enforce that requirement, we literally had to plug this loophole where you're right, some of the business people and some of the landlords really, feel that it's their right to put up whatever they want on their storefront. But storefronts and windows serve a public and a private purpose, and we have to balance that, and that's what this is about.
Yeah. Can I add to that, please?
Ms. Fallon.
Jenny Fallon, Chairman of the Planning Board and Town Meeting Member, Precinct 1. The Planning Board also feels strongly that the bylaw as it exists and as it will be amended really is a business-friendly bylaw, because we want to have in town vital, attractive, pedestrian-friendly, consumer-attractive town centers. And that is clearly the case if you have better window displays and not windows that are covered with signs so no one can see in and see what the merchandise is and so on. And so I think that although there may be some resistance from some store owners, that I think most businesses, in fact, feel that this is a good bylaw.
And I concur. I really appreciate the fact that the Planning Board is taking some steps to help our business communities be more attractive, be more welcoming to pedestrians, and have a greater sense of coherence. So I think that it's a great effort. The concern that I'm really expressing is that I think over the long run we need to find ways to engage the business community in these decisions before they're cast in concrete, so that there can be discussion and input from many perspectives, because in the long run, then everybody feels included.
Mr. Ferenzi.
Sorry.
Ms. Fallon, sorry.
I just want to make a brief statement that the Planning Board absolutely agrees with you, and we are right now working on ways to be able to have a better method of communicating with the business community. I think one of the ideas that we have is to try to establish an email distribution list that would include many of the businesses and landlords in town. To the extent that we can do that, I think we'll be more effective.
Thank you.
Mr. Ferenzi.
If I might, Jennifer, in town meeting, Angela Ferenzi, Precinct 3. This discussion first came up a couple of years ago from the business community itself. They were complaining about the lack of enforcement on signs of their neighbors, all right, and asked us, is there anything we can be doing to address this? Because if you're next to a store that is not as attractive, it certainly impacts your business as well. And so it was an attempt to find a balance, as Jenny mentioned. So there are as many people in the business community in favor of the bylaw and enforcement of the bylaw as there are that object to it. So,
Ms. Mooney.
Jean Mooney, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 6. I just wanted to point out to the Planning Board that there's one other potential loophole that you might want to think about in terms of your language. You've got posted, painted, placed, and affixed, and you may be aware that there's a new technology of projecting signage onto windows. And I don't necessarily know that the word posted would cover that. And there's actually, I think that might be a Massachusetts gentleman who's come up with that technology. But you might want to think about that one.
If that's something that we are informed comes up as a matter of enforcement, we will try to address it.
But it's out there and it's coming, because it's something that you can change on a more rapid basis, and it doesn't incur printing costs. And so you might want to think about that one.
Ms. Marsh.
Nancy Marsh, Precinct 6. I object to this article. I think it's wrong for the town to think that they can come 3 feet into a store and regulate what's going on there. The nature of some businesses requires that the price of their merchandise be listed, such as a real estate office. People want to know how much a house costs. This is just another anti-business regulation that I don't think the town needs. Thank you.
Is there other discussion? Oh, yes, Mr. Samuels.
Joel Samuels, Precinct 6. I have a question perhaps for Town Council. Would a political sign for a candidate for office, if it's a large sign in the window, setback, would that be exempt or would that be included in the bylaw?
There is a definition included for temporary sign, and that's covered in the bylaw.
So a person could not put a political sign up supporting a
No,
particular...
you could put a political sign up. It would be considered a temporary sign.
Okay, so it would be exempt from this bylaw.
And it's covered in the existing bylaw and in the proposed.
Okay, thank you.
Is there other discussion? This requires a two-thirds vote. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed? No. The motion is approved by more than two-thirds. Article 23, Mr. Baghdadi.
Sammy Baghdadi, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 4, and member of the Planning Board. Moved that under Article 23, the reading of the proposed amendments to Section 1.4, definitions and abbreviations, and Section 3.3 of the zoning bylaw of the town be dispensed with, the same being set forth in full under Article 23 in the warrant for this meeting, and having been distributed to each town meeting member.
All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed? It's passed unanimously. Mr. Baghdadi.
Moved that the town vote to amend the zoning bylaw of the town in Section 1.4, definitions and abbreviations, and Section 3.3, as set forth in full under Article 23 in the warrant for this meeting.
Does the warrant committee have a report on this article?
We do. The warrant committee voted 11 opposed, 1 in favor, and 1 abstaining with respect to Article 23.
Sorry, could you repeat that?
11 opposed to Article 23. So in other words, recommending unfavorable action by a vote of 11 to 1 with 1 abstaining.
Thank you. And the planning board, do you have an official?
Yes, the planning board unanimously votes in favor of recommending passage of this article.
And do you want to give a brief, do you want to report for the selectmen, Mr. Frenzy, please?
This is one of the cases where we didn't have unanimous approval of the Board of Selectmen. The Board of Selectmen, in a vote of 2 to 1, recommends unfavorable action.
Thank you. Okay, if I may give a report. This article would basically require banks that want to open a new location in town to first obtain a special permit from the Zoning Board of Appeals. Why is it proposed? I draw your attention to the slide. First, growing community concern over diversity and mix of uses in Belmont Center and other commercial districts. This was a common concern that was voiced by many residents at the charrette that was held by the Belmont Center Planning Group approximately 2 years ago when we were deliberating over the future planning of Belmont Center. In our planning for future development of our commercial squares, we want to promote a diversity of uses that would hopefully promote increased activity. Banks offer a very desirable service to the community, but too many banks reduce our options for diversity of retail and commercial uses. In particular, for example, Belmont Center does have 5 banks right now, and those banks occupy space that could otherwise be used by other different and more diverse retail uses. Second, banks do not promote increased activity and vitality in the town's commercial areas. What that's getting at is that banks typically close either late in the afternoon or early in the evening. And one of the things that we want to encourage in our planning is activity later on in the evening. And so we feel that different uses that would stay open later in the evening, say till 8, 9, or 10 o'clock, would help promote that kind of activity and vitality in our squares. Third, the amendment allows for greater review and more public input in where financial institutions can locate. This amendment, let me make it clear, does not prohibit banks. It merely allows for better planning. It's important, for example, in areas where banks abut residential communities. And in fact, we saw this firsthand in a branch that was recently opened off Route 60, off Pleasant Street. Particularly if a bank has a drive-through, there will be traffic, for example, lighting, and noise issues that would have to be addressed because those would greatly impact a neighboring residential area. Next slide. Okay, again, this lists the number of banks currently in town. You will see there are 13 banks currently in Belmont. 5 of them are located in Belmont Center. I will add that does not include ATMs. Next slide. Okay, facts. First, existing banks and financial institutions are grandfathered, so an existing bank would not need a special permit. A new bank may open in a former bank location without a special permit. So if a bank merges with another bank, for example, a special permit wouldn't be needed. Any increase in business activity, such as hours of operation, size of building, may be subject to a special permit. Second, the proposed amendment does not prohibit new financial institutions from opening in commercial districts. New financial institutions, upon obtaining a special permit from the Zoning Board of Appeals, can still locate in commercial districts, which I said earlier. Third, offices dealing with financial matters such as insurance and brokerage houses are not affected by this amendment. This would address deposit banking institutions, so not insurance offices or financial planning offices, for example. And lastly, automatic teller machines and drive-through windows are not prohibited by this amendment, but may be considered in the decision of whether to grant a special permit for a new bank. So a special permit, an ATM per se is not prohibited, or a drive-through window, but if there was a new bank opening up in a new location with a drive-through, of course that would be part of the special permit consideration. Next slide. Okay, new definition and use category. Basically what this amendment would do is it would add a new definition to the zoning bylaw. Financial institution, which currently doesn't exist. And a financial institution is an establishment open to the public and engaged in deposit banking, and that performs closely related functions such as making loans, investments, and fiduciary activities. Specifically, secondly, what the amendment would do is under the business districts, limited business 1, 2, 3, and general business, you see the SP, okay? What that is saying is banks in those commercial districts would be required by special permit. Several observations. In residential districts, banks are currently not allowed. So the ends that you see up there for no exist in the current bylaw, and that is not changing. Second, currently, if a bank exceeds 5,000 square feet, a new bank, they would require a special permit. So really, the only banks that are affected now are banks that are below 5,000 square feet. Next slide. This details some of the special permit evaluation criteria that the zoning board would look at in evaluating whether to grant a special permit for a bank. So you see things like its location, traffic impacts on abutting residential neighbors. I'm just going to skip through. Activity type and mix. Visual concerns are important. Access, vehicular access and traffic and pedestrian safety, for example. And process. The intent would be for a bank to come and speak with our planners before submitting a plan for a special permit, so that our planners can help them with the and help guide them with the planning concerns. I would like to conclude by saying that there is precedence for this in our current zoning bylaw. Other uses that are allowed only by special permit include motor vehicle service stations, gas stations, only allowed by special permit in town, and same with fast food establishments. And banks, particularly banks with drive-throughs, really raise the same kind of concerns that a fast food establishment would, namely traffic generated, noise. Very frequently, banks have outside depositing windows with speakers that can be loud, particularly where it's near a residential area, and of course, lighting concerns. Again, this bylaw would not prohibit banks, but it's supposed to promote a better planning process. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Leclerc, did you want
to? Dan Leclerc, town meeting member at large. I would like to speak in support of Article 23. I appreciate the value of banks as reliable and lucrative tenants in our town centers and the manner in which their presence enhances our town's tax revenue. But I also believe that as citizens we have a right to a voice as to the composition of our commercial centers regarding quality of life and variety of enterprises. Darkened buildings after 5 p.m. and often empty buildings does not contribute to vitality and energy. If the case can be made that banks provide more revenue for the town, I would argue that a marginal increase in revenue does not necessarily trump the quality of life we deserve in this town. But having said that, it is also possible that increased vitality might even yield greater revenue through the stimulation of more foot traffic for all of our businesses during all hours that the centers are open. At the end of the day, I believe it is an unproven hypothesis that banks necessarily increase tax revenue when they serve to dampen other kinds of profitable and more dynamic enterprises.
Discussion. Mr. Cohen.
Martin Cohen, Precinct 3, and member of the Zoning Board of Appeals, but I'm speaking for myself and not for the Zoning Board. I urge that this proposed amendment be defeated. I will not take an issue as to whether Belmont should or should not be the Switzerland of Middlesex County. But consider this. As compared with food establishments and service stations, banks are quite benign. They don't generate much traffic. They don't need dumpsters. They don't have much in the way of deliveries, and so on. Let us consider, as we think about this proposed amendment, what might be a typical case, say, at Belmont Center. One of the 5 banks decides to move out, leaving a place that is suitable for banking, and now we address the question of a special permit. Ideal for a bank. Another bank wants to come in there. But there are too many banks. We consider that this is detrimental to the area in some way. But which would we rather have? Another restaurant, or an empty store, or a bank? That's the issue, really.
Ms. Marsh.
Yes, Nancy.
Excuse me, one correction.
Oh.
If an existing bank moves, the use is grandfathered, so a new bank could move into that location.
Thank you for the clear. Ms. Marsh.
Nancy Marsh, Precinct 6. I apologize for speaking 3 times this evening. I'll be brief. I object to this article. The concept that banks are bad or that we have too many banks is ill-conceived. In order to form a bank, one must undergo strict scrutiny by the state. Most of the banks that have come to Belmont have stayed for a long period of time, provided jobs for local residents, and been good citizens of the town. They have donated to the Habitat House and to the Senior Center. Banks as a whole do not create environmental issues. They keep a low profile. I would rather see a successful bank occupy a commercial space than an ill-conceived and undercapitalized business with little chance of success. To say that banks are the cause of the demise of mom-and-pop stores is overreaching and unfounded. The failure of the smaller stores is due to landlords who raise rents to an untenable level. A classic example of this is Joy of Hair, hair salon in Cushing Square, who for many years served the elderly population of our town with kindness and compassion and reasonable rates. Joy was forced out of business by a steep increase in her rent. Her hair salon is not destined to become a bank. Barring a severely severely restricting banks is a bad precedent. Today, it's banks. Tomorrow, it will be realtors, hair salons, or coffee shops. Let businesses seek their own level. Support Belmont business without so much regulation. Thank you.
Mr. Cohen, you had a point of clarification there.
I think Mr. Baghdadi is mistaken. I know that with food establishments, just a change of ownership, even with no other change in the operation, a new special permit is required, and the whole process has to be gone over. The hours of operation have to be considered, and so on. If we have special permits for banks, if a bank were to move out and another bank wanted to take over the premises, I think there would be the same thing. It's only the existing bank staying that would be grandfathered.
A response?
Good evening. I'm Jeffrey Wheeler, the town's planning coordinator. Both gentlemen are partly correct. It depends on whether or not a condition is placed upon the special permit by the Zoning Board of Appeals. In Mr. Conan's example of the fast food restaurants, when the change of ownership, the Zoning Board of Appeals has placed a condition stating that any change in ownership requires a new special permit. That is an option of the Zoning Board of Appeals. It's not a requirement. So if the Zoning Board of Appeals doesn't place that, then a new restaurant, or in this case, a new bank can go in without a special permit.
Thank you. Yes.
Roger Colton, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 6. I actually have a question for the Planning Board, Sammy or Jenny. The Belmont Planning Center group who held the charrette that you mentioned and that I actually attended a couple of years ago, did it address this issue? Did the planning group recommend that the town take this action? And if so, is there somebody from the Belmont Center Planning Group here that could talk about what input it received and what its deliberations were, which led to that recommendation?
Yes, I mean, I will give you an answer, okay? I see at least two people who are on the Belmont Center Planning Group, one of which is on the mic right now, myself. And at the time, there were comments from people at the charrette that one of the problems with Belmont Center is there are so many banks, and come the nighttime, we have all these dark spots that aren't pedestrian-friendly at night. It's not attractive. And I do believe that that is a recommendation in their report to address the issue of too many banks in Belmont Center. Second, I would say, this also came up in our investigation and hearings and deliberation over Cushing Square. And our Cushing Square overlay bylaw that allows and gives incentive for redevelopment and gives certain density bonuses and reduction in parking requirements, for example, specifically prohibits banks from those benefits. So that is another source of precedence in our current
Mr. Colton, did
bylaw.
If I may build on that answer then, being a person who had been involved with the planning group that was involved with the Waverly Square Fire Station, I know how many dozens or hundreds of hours go into the collection of data, the consideration of viewpoints, the balancing of viewpoints, and the deliberations. And if the Belmont Center Planning Group did in fact recommend this, I believe that that recommendation, in addition to the recommendation from the Planning Board, should be given great weight. And I would be inclined to defer to their deliberations, their data collection, and their balancing of viewpoints and perspectives in their deliberations. Thank you.
Mr. Hoffman and then Mr. Frenzy.
Mr. Moderator, can I just add one thing?
Sure. Ms. Fallon.
Jenny Fallon, Chairman of the Planning Board. I'd just like to add that this recommendation was also found in the BEDPEG, the Business and Economic Development Planning Group, which report was made about 5 years ago, I guess. And so I would just like to say that the Planning Board has heard this concern coming up in a number of ways from a number of thoughtful studies, and that's why we're bringing it to town meeting. We welcome